Borthakur IAS Academy প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, this is Funny. Welcome to Borthakur IAS Academy. This is our daily Hindu analysis class for 13th September 2021. Let us begin with the first article for today. Now we have some interesting statements from Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramana, Honorable Chief Justice of India. Now he is saying that the democratic rights that we take for granted today, right, the democratic rights that we enjoy on a day-to-day basis are a result of struggles of thousands of young people who took to the streets fighting authoritarian figures either during the freedom struggle or the dark days of emergency. So he is addressing the youth, saying that youth of our country, youth of India should be more aware of social realities and the concerns that are in our society today, right? He was pointing out to the fact where many of young people lost their lives, they sacrificed their lives so that we can have freedom today. They sacrificed their careers, all because of the greater good. What was the greater good during the freedom struggle? To gain India freedom, independent from the British rule. During the emergencies, to fight against the emergency itself. And during those, both of those two periods, youth, particularly a large section of Indian youth, sacrificed their careers, in some cases sacrificed their lives, so that we can enjoy, the today youth, or you, to be specific, enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy today. Now, just because of the greater good of the nation and the society, those people sacrifice their lives. Now it is up to us, meaning the youth of today, to ensure that we understand the social realities and also the concerns of the current society, right? That is what he was saying during an event. So in essence, what does this social realities means? See, Indian society is experiencing certain challenges in terms of, in almost all aspects of its society. Now he is saying that youth, you must trust the youth to check the deviations in society's journey towards peace and progress. That should be the goal, or that should be the awareness that youth should possess, so that they are ready to address these new social realities that are, in essence, nothing but challenges that Indian society is facing. See, Indian society currently is going through various changes in terms of its cultural identities, its certain sections of religious identities too. So it is up to the society, so that it is up to the youth particularly to check any deviations in the wrong directions, and they should be aware of these too. The Honorable Chief Justice was quoting Swami Vivekananda nonetheless. See, he was saying that, what did Swami Vivekananda say? Swami Vivekananda said that you did not tolerate injustice either to themselves or against others. They did not compromise on their ideals. They were not only selfless but also adventurous. They are willing to sacrifice for the cause they believed in. It is the unadulterated minds and pure hearts that form the backbone of our nations. He said it was necessary for you to be aware of social realities and challenges. Yes, you have one of the biggest moments in any country. You take any freedom movement, you take any anti-corruption movement, youth are the backbone of those movements. Even in India, that case is true, because when you look at the freedom struggle, though it was led by senior freedom fighters, at the end of it, the movement sustained on the backbones of youth who were relentless in their pursuit to get India freedom from the Britishers. Later on, during the emergency too, it was the youth who took up the mantle to ensure that the freedom of information does stay alive. So at the end of the day, the words of Swami Vivekananda are truer than ever, because it is the youth that are the backbone of the country. When they set their minds to achieve something, it gets achieved. If they set their mind to do something, it gets done. They don't tolerate, majority of the youth do not tolerate injustice to neither themselves, nor if they see somebody being abused or anything like that. They don't want injustice happening to others also. That is what he is trying to say. That is what he wants to bring out the youth, or the current youth, out into, because he wants their participation into our society, so that they arrest any deviations. Arrest not in the sense that police arrest, but prevent any deviations in society's trajectory, and they ensure that the path of the Indian society stays towards peace and progress. And so in this scenario, he was directly addressing the youth by saying that it is for you to build the ideal nation and society that you desire to witness. Right? He firmly believed that the true essence of religion was the common good and tolerance. Religion should be above the superstitious and rigidities. To fulfill the dream of making resurgent India through the principles of common good and tolerance, we should instill the ideals of Swamiji in today's youth. Again, see, remember, one of the biggest things that I was talking about, Indian society is currently going through a kind of a churn and a change in terms of its cultural identity, cultural relevances, religious ideologies. At the end of the day, there is a greater chance, or at least there is some chance, that some aspects of those changes or transformations might lead to a deviation which is not only unwarranted but also undesirable. I'm not saying that it is going to happen, but when you have certain things happening, everything cannot be controlled. There might be some deviations that one might not be happy with, or at least a large section of Indian society might not be happy with and does not desire it to be so. So it is up to the youth of the country, particularly our country, to ensure that those kinds of deviations do not find foothold in our society. That is why we say, when we talk about religion, it should be above superstitious, it should be above religious rigidities, it should be more about tolerance, it should be more about common good. That is the essence of religion, right? That was what Swami Vivekananda was trying to propagate through his speeches, through his words. Now, at the end of the day, as far as the social realities and concerns, our youth, particularly our country's youth, should be more in tune with social realities and also in tune with concerns that currently plague our society. Then only we can transcend into a society. No, there will be problems at the end of the day, but nonetheless, the deviations that Chief Justice of India is talking about here, nobody desires them. Most of the population, almost all of the population, or at least the majority of the population, do not desire the deviations that we are currently seeing place in our society. So it is up to the youth to bring in that sense of common good, to bring in that sense of tolerance, so that they rise above the superstitions and rigidities of any religion, not only one religion or two religions, but any religion that tend to dominate the discourse currently. And it should be for them to fulfill the dream of making India, which is built on the ideals and principles of common good and tolerance. So again, this is interesting, right? His speech, he is trying to emulate the words of Swami Vivekananda, where he is trying to force the youth to introspect on the current scenario in our Indian society. I felt that this was kind of interesting coming from the Chief Justice of India at this point of time. So I think that is something to think about. Apart from it, I don't see much of an importance for exam point of view. Maybe ethics point of view might get a question, but GS I don't see much. But as I said, ethics is something that can be considered on these terms, because there is a scope that these kinds of questions might be asked during your mains in ethics paper. Now moving on to the next article. A global war on terror with no tangible results. So we can understand, or we agree on one point, right? Since the September 11 attacks 2 decades ago, everything in regards to the world has changed. The attacks not only had an impact on America, they also had an impact around the world. It was felt around the world, and certainly post 9/11 a lot of things changed around the world, including America. The biggest of changes happened in America. But at the end of the day, the loss of life, the emotional trauma that America and the world went through because of 9/11 attacks and subsequent attacks is unimaginable. But nonetheless, the primary outcomes, or the two primary outcomes of the 9/11 attacks, post 9/11 attacks, was first America deciding that they are going to invade Afghanistan, because they found that, or the idea was that Al-Qaeda was having a home in Afghanistan, which was being provided by Taliban. The idea was that they were going to invade a landlocked, strategically located Afghanistan where Al-Qaeda was hiding. But the second most important aspect that came out of post 9/11 is the launch of global war on terror. Right, you had Bush coming out and announcing to the public to American public and the world at a time, saying that America is going to launch a global war on terror. 2 decades down the line, we are seeing the results of that announcement, right? When America invaded Afghanistan, they were successful in uprooting Al Qaeda from Afghanistan. But recently, we understand the implications and the fallout of American withdrawal or American troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. See, the US led war on terror has yielded no tangible results as of yet or as of now. What was the intent behind the announcement of or the launch of a global war on terror? To uproot terrorism from the world. And where are we right now, 2 decades later? The ideology of terror or terrorism is more complicated now than ever it was before. The ideas, the principles, the way that these people operate, terrorists operate, has drastically changed as compared to what it was 20 years ago, right? A lot of things have changed, certainly. So before we get into this article a bit more, we are not going to comment or we are not going to criticize the actions of President Biden. That is a personal attack on him, and the article does certainly go into that aspect, but it is neither required nor for us to decide on what. We are looking it from an objective perspective, objectivity, so that we have a good answer for our answer writing. So that is where we'll try to limit ourselves, and we are not going to go into much of a speculation or kind of a character evaluation kind of a thing. We'll try to be very objective throughout this article. So when President Biden announced the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, there is a possibility that he might have laid seeds of another 9/11 on America or on any other country. On America, less likely, but on other countries, most probably. Right? This is one of the biggest worries that countries in the region have, and also allies of US are having right now. The biggest worry is terrorists or terrorist outfits are going to find a new place to grow, a new place to strategize. And remember, terrorism is not the same that it was 20 years ago. A lot of things have changed. The way that they operate, the way that they recruit, the way that they train have incrementally improved, changed, and drastically became even harder to find right now. Now everything is at a critical point. There is a greater chance that a 9/11 style attack might emanate from Afghanistan in the future, not only directed at America, but primarily on countries in the region specifically, and also any other country in the world. See, that was the biggest worry, and at this point of time, it is very likely that we are going to see some sort of a watershed terrorist attack on either America or on other countries. Now, what has happened in Afghanistan? We discussed at length what has happened in Afghanistan. See, at the end of the day, after a 20-year prolonged war, Taliban are back at the helm again. Organizations like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Khorasan province, or whatever it is, but nonetheless Islamic State or a branch of Islamic State are finding foothold in Afghanistan. When you look at it from the Indian perspective, Jaish-e-Mohammed, JEM, or whatever it is, they are also finding through Haqqani network, they are also finding a home in Afghanistan. Now, at least there was a fear that it would be the epicenter of terrorism in the future. But at this point of time, it is certain that Afghanistan is going to be an epicenter of terrorism And when you look at it from the Indian perspective, we are in much more troublesome position than we have ever been. We have two hostile neighbors right now. We have an active border standoff we have been having with Pakistan, and now we are having one with China, with far more serious consequences than that would have been with Pakistan, right? There is a greater chance that China is going to use the instability or the Taliban as a proxy to attack India. There is a greater chance, and if they want it to be a tool against India, they can make it so, and they have already laid the foundation work for the same too. As far as the Indian scenario is concerned, we have very little room to navigate. We have very little room to negotiate. Right. The reality is, when America announced that they are going to pull out of Afghanistan, the biggest reaction came from allies that were dependent on US military assistance. Look at the allies itself. You have Taiwan, you have Ukraine, and other regional allies who were significantly dependent on America's assistance during crisis. Let us look at Taiwan. China is flying active armed fighter jets into Taiwanese airspace, into Taiwan straits. They are challenging Taiwan on a day-to-day basis. When America announced the troop withdrawal, you have Global Times, the mouthpiece of Chinese Communist Party, saying that it is of less time before China gets control of Taiwan, and America is just going to stand by, and it is going to abandon its allies like it abandoned Afghanistan. On the Ukrainian front, you have Russia trying to annex parts of Ukraine. They have successfully annexed Crimea. You have Ukraine with the Crimean situation, where Russia is actively trying to annex more territory. They have already annexed Crimea. They are trying to control of the sea that surrounds the Crimean Peninsula. Ukraine is at a critical point in their own security threat or security stature compared to Taiwan. Both are comparable. You have Taiwan with the Chinese problem, you have Ukraine with the Russian problem. These two countries are dependent on allies, right? Western allies, to support them in case of any possible war. Not only war, any kind of possible standoff with either China or with Russia. Now, the fear between these allies, particularly Taiwan and Ukraine, is that what will happen to them if and when China decides to invade Taiwan? What will happen to Ukraine if and when Russia decides that they are going to get more chunk of Ukraine back into their fold? And the belief, trust me, the scenario is such that though they are not saying it out loud, internally everybody is thinking that what America did with Afghanistan is wrong. But again, you have to look at it from the American perspective. They have their own reasons. But nonetheless, the impact of the withdrawal is huge and far and wide, not only in terms of regional security matrix, but also in terms of global geopolitics, right? Security politics. Now, this is something interesting, right? You had a person called Robert Gates, who served as a Secretary of Defense under President George W. Bush and also Barack Obama. And in 2014, he wrote a memoir that, in regards to particularly the memoir, had a particular paragraph or a statement regarding President Biden, who was then the Vice President. And during the Bush era, he was the Senator Biden, right? In Obama period, he was the Vice President. So in his memoir, he wrote that Mr. Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. And this statement rings more true right now than it has ever before. You had Hamid Karzai, the ex-president of Afghanistan, speaking at an event stating that when Mr. Karzai was talking about security situation in Afghanistan and the importance of Pakistan in maintaining status quo in Afghanistan, and he was attributing the fact that in order to better the situation in Afghanistan, or at least try or stem the flow of terrorism or resurgence of Taliban in Afghanistan, you need to ensure that or reign in Pakistan, meaning he was asking the US senators that he was meeting with that you have to reign in Pakistan so that they don't support Taliban. That is the only way that we can win and ensure that democracy survives, or at least some sort of a democracy or a free society survives in Afghanistan. And he was saying that Mr. Biden was sitting very close to them and hearing the whole conversation. And when Mr. Karzai said that you have to reign in Pakistan, Mr. Biden interrupted him and asked, Pakistan is 50 times more important to us than Afghanistan. Just imagine the statement. You are the president of Afghanistan, or at least you are the ex-president of Afghanistan, and you being at that position, you are sharing information that is more critical to US, because at the end of the day, US was in Afghanistan at that point of time, and US was a major ally to Afghanistan. And there was a possibility that the problem that Afghanistan was having from Taliban was going to be solved. The only solution was that you have to reign in Pakistan. But what was the thought process behind Mr. Biden's statement? Pakistan is 50 times more important than Afghanistan. So you get a sense from that statement, or at least from Mr. Biden's understanding, how important Pakistan is to US, or at least from his perspective to US. And what is the current scenario? You have Pakistan actively sending its agents, its representatives, to aid and abet the formation of the so-called government in Afghanistan, the Taliban government or Taliban-led government. And you have enough evidence that Pakistan was supporting Taliban for the past 20 years. On one side saying supporting America, on the other side it was supporting Taliban too, which America was fighting with the help of Pakistan. Now when you look at the statement, Mr. Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. That statement rings true. That is what he was saying, Mr. Robert Gates was saying, and that happened. That kind of is true right now, and we are seeing the fallout of it. Now the interesting statement that this article talks about is the quotation that Al-Qaeda leader who was killed by the Americans in May of a few years back, Osama Bin Laden, in a 2010 letter which was found in his Pakistan compound when he was raided and killed by US Navy SEALs. In that letter, which was dated as May 2010, he advised Al-Qaeda members, Al-Qaeda terrorist members, not to target the then Vice President Biden. So they were trying to formulate a assassination plot against Biden, who happened to be the Vice President. And in this 2010 letter, the leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama Bin Laden, prior to his death, was saying that please don't kill him. He was saying that it was more he was more dangerous than anybody else. And so the idea behind Osama Bin Laden saying that please don't kill then Vice President Biden, because his thought process was that, or at least Osama Bin Laden's thought process was that if Biden, if and when becomes president, he'll do more damage to America than they ever could. That was the idea or intent behind his advice or fatwa to Al-Qaeda operatives, not to kill him or not to assassinate him. Now that is an interesting take, but make what you make of it. But now let us come back to the Afghanistan situation. You recently had statements from senior officials from the US Biden administration along with President Biden, where he was trying to differentiate good terrorists and bad terrorists. He was saying that Taliban are part of good terrorists. We discussed this concept called basket of good Taliban and basket of bad Taliban. But that is what he was again trying to do here, but in a very different and a darker tone, in the sense that he was trying to portray Taliban as good terrorists, and the Islamic State Khorasan branch, which was responsible for the August 13th or August 15th terror attack, which led to the death of 200 Afghan innocent civilians along with 13 US service members who were aiding evacuations of Afghan and American and other national citizens out of Kabul. Now, America and Taliban identified that ISIA-K, which is Islamic State Khorasan, was responsible for that suicide attack, double suicide attack in Kabul. And over a period of time, you saw statements coming out of the Biden administration, including the president himself, making a point it to differentiate Taliban from Islamic State. He was terming Taliban as good terrorists and Islamic State as bad. But the reality is, there is enough evidence out there right now that, see, Al-Qaeda gets most of its operatives. What that statement essentially means is that you have Taliban on the one side, which is willing to work with the government, US government, and so hence they are good terrorists. On the other hand, you have the ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, and the Haqqani network, which are a part of bad basket of terrorists. See, there is enough evidence right now that the Islamic State or the Islamic State Khorasan province, most of its fighters, most of its recruits come from Haqqani network. Haqqani network has its roots in Pakistan. Most of the terrorist attack that took place in India had funding from Haqqani networks, and most of those operatives were from Haqqani network. You have a steady flow of Haqqani network operatives, terrorists, going and joining and turning into Islamic State Khorasan province. So what was one of the first action that Taliban did after they took over Afghanistan? They freed thousands of Islamic State fighters who were languishing in Afghan jails, and they released them into freedom. Now, the problem that majority of the analysts and many countries are struggling to balance is drawing distinctions between those who threaten US security and those who threaten others. So what is the statement here? So as far as Taliban promised that they are not going to help anybody who is thinking or planning to attack US, terming them as good because they are supporting the US security concerns, and you are trying to differentiate the people who are threatening US and people threatening other countries. So you are making a priority to prevent attacks on US, and you are setting the precedence or giving a free hand to other terrorist organizations who threaten other countries other than US. So it is a recipe for disaster. It's nothing more, right? It is a recipe for disaster. That is where the idea of another 9/11 style attack probably and likely happening in other countries rather than in US. So what has been an Indian statement all along, even when Prime Minister Modi visited US Senate, his statement was, or during his speech, he highlighted the fact that you must not differentiate terrorists as good terrorists or bad terrorists. Terrorism is bad, irrespective of who is carrying it out. You have to end it. You cannot support terrorist cells, you cannot support networks. You have to target every bit of them, and you have to wipe them out of their existence. You cannot differentiate on good and badness. If they are supporting you, they are being termed as good. That is not good. It will end badly for others. If they are against you, you are terming them as bad and you are going after them. That is also not the proper way. You have to identify terrorism as it is, and you have to end it. That is how you get results. It should be a global coalition against these terrorists. Just because they promise that they are not going to attack you, terming them as good terrorists is a bad idea. That is what we were trying to say for the last few decades. We are saying that you have to treat terrorism in a unified way. You cannot differentiate, pick and choose in terrorism. All forms of terrorism is bad. That is what we were trying to say. So as I was saying, right, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda remain closely aligned. They work for each other, they support each other, they finance each other. That was the thing. The idea that Taliban is no longer going to support Al-Qaeda is a wrong assumption. They are aligned, they have been closely aligned for a long period of time. And the recent developments in Afghanistan is going to ensure that they remain close and align closely. and cooperate through Haqqani network to get their financing, to get weapons, to get their necessary things. See, all these modules operate with each other. They communicate, cooperate, and integrate with each other while existing as independent units, right? Independent entities. When you say that the Islamic State Khorasan province is a part of Islamic State, you couldn't be more wronger, right? The idea that the Islamic State, which was founded by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was a part of Al-Qaeda, but later on branched out of Al-Qaeda after the decimation of Al-Qaeda and started up Islamic State, and now you have Islamic State Khorasan province, Khorasan branch of Islamic State. But again, you have to be careful when you say that. Though they share the same name, they are not related to one another. The Islamic State K, that is the Khorasan province, is the brainchild of Pakistan Intelligence Services, right? Inter-intelligence services, that is where the ISIK came out of. That is where they were trying to use deception so that they can have a plausible deniability against future attacks that they carry out, but instead of themselves carrying it out, they are going to use proxy organizations like Islamic State Khorasan province to carry out those attacks and say that we have no relation with them, we don't know who they are also terrorist organizations, but all the strings are being pulled by the intelligence agencies of Pakistan, right? The Taliban and the Haqqani network are not two separate entities. They operate with each other, they are aligned with each other, and they cooperate on almost all of the aspects. You saw the government that Afghanistan that was announced by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Most of those appointments, or the so-called appointments, were from Haqqani network, right? You have to be careful when you are saying about good terrorists and bad terrorists. You have to ensure that whatever the fight that America intends to carry, or the Western global powers intend to carry against terrorism, it should be a unified response. Otherwise, the scope of another attack of such level like the 9/11 is higher, and particularly India is vulnerable to these attacks. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। Borthakur IAS Academy।